They say betrayal hits hardest when you least expect it, but for me, the signs weren't just subtle, they were practically invisible. Emily wasn't pulling the classic moves. No cold shoulder, no sudden distance. On the contrary, she was intoxicatingly present. Too present. Her newfound energy swept through our home like a storm, cleaning, cooking extravagant dinners, suggesting we go out more. At first, I thought, maybe she's just rediscovered her spark. Little did I know, she was trying to cover her tracks. It all started with a party. A black tie gala hosted by some big-shot law firm Emily worked with. She claimed it was an opportunity for me to meet her colleagues. But the truth became clear soon enough. As soon as we arrived, Emily abandoned me like a forgotten coat. The venue was opulent, suffocatingly so, marble floors that reflected chandeliers above, and waiters weaving through clusters of people with trays of champagne. I wandered the room, clutching my glass, smiling awkwardly at strangers. Emily was nowhere to be seen. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I caught her. She was standing near the bar, laughing. But not her usual laugh. It was this high-pitched, overly eager sound that grated my nerves because I knew it wasn't real. She was leaning into a man. I didn't recognize him at first, but something about the way she tilted her head, exposing her neck like she was on a damn perfume ad, made my stomach churn. I approached quietly, not ready to make a scene but too curious to stay away. That's when I heard his voice. Low, smooth, and far too familiar. His name was Travis. He wasn't just anyone. He was Emily's colleague. The one she casually mentioned over dinner last month, calling him a brilliant strategist who helped her win a big case. Now I was watching her touch his arm like it was second nature, her fingers trailing down the sleeve of his tailored suit. They didn't see me at first. I stood there, not breathing, while she leaned in, whispering something into his ear. He smirked and whispered back, his hand grazing her waist as he did. I felt the blood in my veins turn molten. Emily. My voice came out sharper than I intended. Both of them jumped like guilty teenagers caught smoking behind the gym. Emily straightened immediately, her eyes wide with that perfect blend of fake surprise and irritation. "Oh, hey, Matt," she said, her tone casual as if I hadn't just witnessed her practically draping herself over this guy. "Travis, this is my husband." She gestured towards me with a forced smile, like she was presenting a client she didn't particularly like. Travis extended his hand, the picture of confidence. "Nice to meet you, man," he said. His voice so smooth I wanted to punch him just to ruin it. I ignored his hand. "Having fun?" I asked Emily, my voice calm but barely concealing the anger boiling underneath. "Of course. I was just introducing Travis to some of the team," she said quickly, her words coming out like rehearsed lines. Her hand found my arm, a calculated move to pacify me. But I wasn't buying it. "You introduce people with your hands on their waist now?" I shot back, my voice low enough that only the three of us could hear. Travis raised his hands like he was backing away from a wild animal. "I'll, let you two talk." He disappeared into the crowd, but not before shooting Emily a quick glance. A look that spoke volumes. "What the hell was that?" I asked, my voice cold. She sighed, her irritation slipping through. "Matt, can we not do this here? It's a work event. You're making a scene." "Making a scene?" I laughed. A short, bitter sound. "You're the one acting like—" I stopped myself, my fists clenched. "You know what? Fine. Let's not do this here." Her eyes flickered, a brief crack in her armor. She knew I wasn't going to drop it, and for the first time that evening, she looked uncomfortable. "Go get your things," I said, my tone flat. "We're leaving." She hesitated but eventually nodded. As she walked away, I noticed Travis standing by the bar, watching us with a smirk that made my blood boil. But I didn't cause a scene. Not yet. Instead, I stood there, sipping my champagne, my mind racing. The night wasn't over, and neither was this game. The car ride home was suffocating. The silence wasn't just heavy. It was loaded, like a gun cocked and ready to fire. Emily stared out the window, her perfectly manicured nails tapping against her phone screen, as if she were rehearsing a way out of this. Meanwhile, I gripped the steering wheel so tightly I thought I might snap it in two. When we pulled into the driveway, I didn't wait for her. I slammed the car door shut and went inside, straight to the kitchen. I poured myself a glass of bourbon, no ice. Emily followed, slower, taking her time, probably trying to gauge my mood. "Matt, you're overreacting," she started as soon as she walked in. Her voice calm but with that edge she always used when she was trying to control the narrative. I turned to face her, leaning against the counter. "Overreacting," I repeated, my voice cold. "I caught you practically glued to another man, Emily. If anything, I'm underreacting." She crossed her arms, the perfect picture of exasperation. "Oh, come on. Travis is just a colleague. We were talking shop. That's it." I laughed, a sharp, bitter sound that echoed off the kitchen walls. "Talking shop? You were touching his arm like you were auditioning for The Bachelor. Do you think I'm blind? Or just stupid?" Her face hardened. "I can't believe you're making this into something it's not. I was networking. That's what people do at these events." I took a slow sip of my bourbon, my eyes locked on hers. "Networking doesn't involve whispering into someone's ear or brushing up against them like that. And it sure as hell doesn't involve the looks you two were exchanging." Her jaw tightened. For a moment I thought she might actually come clean. Instead, she sighed dramatically, her hand coming up to rub her temples. "You're being paranoid, Matt. You always get like this when you're stressed." There it was, gaslighting, her favorite trick. She was flipping the script, trying to make me the irrational one. But not this time. "Don't," I said, my voice low and steady. "Don't you dare turn this around on me. I know what I saw." She hesitated, just for a second. But it was enough. I saw the guilt flash in her eyes before she buried it under her usual bravado. "Fine," she said, throwing her hands up. "Believe whatever you want. Clearly, nothing I say is going to convince you." I didn't respond. Instead, I pulled out my phone and opened the gallery. I'd snapped a photo at the party when they weren't looking. It was blurry, but unmistakable. Emily leaning into Travis, her hand on his chest. I held the phone out to her. "Explain this," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Her face went pale. For the first time that night, she was speechless. But then, like a true performer, she recovered quickly. "You're seriously stalking me now? Taking pictures like some jealous creep?" I shook my head, laughing bitterly. "That's your defense? Not an apology, not an explanation, just deflecting and blaming me? Unbelievable." Her expression twisted into something ugly, defensive, angry, desperate. "Do you even hear yourself? You're acting insane. You're blowing this way out of proportion. Nothing happened." "Nothing happened?" I barked. My voice rose, filling the room. "Do you honestly expect me to believe that? You weren't just flirting with him, Emily. You were practically throwing yourself at him." She slammed her hand down on the counter. "Fine," she snapped, her voice shaking. "I was flirting, okay? Happy now? Is that what you wanted to hear?" The words hung in the air like smoke. For a moment, the room was silent except for the faint hum of the refrigerator. "Flirting," I repeated, my voice eerily calm. "That's your story?" She folded her arms, glaring at me. "Yes, flirting. It didn't mean anything, Matt. God, you're acting like I cheated on you or something." I stared at her, my stomach churning. She was lying. I could see it in her eyes, hear it in the way her voice wavered. But what killed me wasn't the lie itself. It was the way she delivered it, like she actually believed she could talk her way out of this. "Go ahead," I said, setting my glass down on the counter. "Keep digging that hole, Emily. Let's see how deep it gets." Her eyes narrowed. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means," I said, stepping closer to her, "I'm done playing the fool. I saw enough tonight to know there's more to this story, and I'm going to find out exactly what you're hiding." She stared at me, her confidence faltering for the first time. "Matt, you're being ridiculous. This is all in your head." I didn't reply. Instead, I walked past her, heading for the bedroom. "Where are you going?" she called after me. "To get some answers," I said without looking back. The sound of my footsteps echoed through the hallway, but her silence was louder. She knew the game had changed. And so did I. I slammed the bedroom door behind me, the noise reverberating through the house. My mind was a storm of fury and adrenaline, but I forced myself to focus. Emily thought she could outsmart me, twist the truth, and walk away unscathed. Not this time. If she was hiding something, I was going to find it. I sat on the edge of the bed, her purse sitting on the dresser like an unspoken challenge. She never let me touch her phone, but she'd gotten careless with everything else. After a quick glance to make sure she wasn't lurking by the door, I opened her bag. There it was, her phone tucked neatly into the side pocket. Locked, of course. I set it aside and continued digging through the chaos: lipstick, receipts, stray gum wrappers. And then I found it. A small, crumpled piece of paper with an address scrawled across it in Travis's unmistakably neat handwriting. Beneath the address was today's date and the time, 5 p.m. I stared at it, my pulse quickening. The gala had started at 7 p.m., so they'd met before the party. I crushed the paper in my hand, anger flaring hot in my chest. This wasn't just casual flirting. There was something deliberate about this, a plan. I shoved the note into my pocket, grabbed her phone, and walked out of the bedroom. Emily was waiting in the living room, perched on the edge of the couch with her arms crossed. She looked up when she saw me, her eyes narrowing. "What the hell were you doing in there?" she demanded. I held up her phone. "Unlock it." Her face twisted into a look of pure indignation. "Are you serious right now? You're going through my stuff? That's insane, Matt. Insane." I stepped closer, holding her gaze. "No, Emily. Insane is sneaking off to meet another man before a party and thinking your husband wouldn't find out." Her eyes flicked to my pocket. She knew. But instead of panicking, she leaned back, her expression hardening. "You're being paranoid. That address? It was for a meeting. Travis and I were finalizing the presentation for next week. At 5 p.m.? At some random address that isn't even his office." I snapped. "You really think I'm that stupid?" She shrugged, playing it cool. "Not my fault you're insecure, Matt. Maybe if you focused less on stalking me and more on your own life, you wouldn't feel so threatened by my career." Her words hit like a slap, but I refused to let her see it. I was done letting her control the narrative. "Unlock the phone," I repeated, my voice low but steady. "No," she said, standing up now. "This has gone far enough. You're acting like a psycho, and I'm not going to entertain this any longer." She reached for her phone, but I pulled it back. "You want to fight about this?" I said, my voice ice cold. "Fine, but let me make one thing clear. If I find out you're lying, there's no coming back from this." For the first time, I saw something flicker in her eyes. Fear, maybe, or guilt. It was brief, but it was there. "I'm not lying," she said, her voice softer now, almost pleading. "Matt, you have to trust me." I stared at her, my resolve hardening. "Trust is earned, and you've been spending yours like it's monopoly money." Her face twisted in frustration, but she didn't argue. Instead, she turned and stormed off towards the kitchen, leaving me standing there, her phone still in my hand. I didn't waste a second. I went back to the bedroom, locking the door behind me. Then I sat on the bed and opened her phone. Her password hadn't changed, it was still our anniversary. That irony wasn't lost on me as the lock screen disappeared, revealing her neatly organized apps. I went straight to her messages. First, it looked clean. Conversations with coworkers, friends, even her mom. But then I saw it. A message thread with no name, just a single emoji. A black heart. I opened it, my hands trembling. The texts were short, coded, and nauseatingly intimate. "See you at 5. Can't wait. Tonight was risky but worth it. Thinking about earlier. Can't stop smiling." And the photos. God help me, the photos. Her face, her smile, her body, all sent to him. Couldn't breathe. My vision blurred. My head pounding with every heartbeat. It wasn't just betrayal. It was a mockery of everything I thought we had. I scrolled further, my stomach turning with each new message. Finally, I saw the one that sent me over the edge. "I can't believe he hasn't figured it out yet. Poor guy." The phone slipped from my hand, clattering to the floor. I sat there, staring at the wall, my mind spinning. She wasn't just lying to me. She was laughing at me, mocking me, and now I wasn't just angry. I was ready to burn her entire charade to the ground. That I sat in silence for what felt like hours, though it couldn't have been more than a few minutes. The room was spinning, the messages playing on a loop in my mind like a broken record. I can't believe he hasn't figured it out yet. Poor guy. Those words hit me harder than any punch ever could. The betrayal wasn't just physical. It was her delight in my ignorance that gutted me. Emily wasn't just sneaking around. She was reveling in it. The person I thought I knew, the woman I'd shared my life with for nearly a decade, wasn't just lying. She was orchestrating her deceit with pride. I stood up, adrenaline coursing through me. I had the evidence. There was no more pretending, no more games. It was time to confront her, and this time, she wouldn't worm her way out of it with gaslighting or fake apologies. When I walked into the kitchen, Emily was there, leaning against the counter with a glass of wine in her hand. She glanced at me, her expression guarded. "Done with your little investigation?" she asked, her tone clipped. I didn't respond right away. I just stared at her, letting the weight of the silence press down on her. She shifted uncomfortably, her fingers tightening around the stem of her glass. "You want to know what I found?" I said finally, my voice calm. Too calm. "Let me guess," she said with a bitter laugh. "Nothing, because there's nothing to find. But hey, if this is how you get your kicks." I cut her off. The black heart emoji. The words landed like a grenade. Her face paled, the color draining so fast it was almost impressive. For a moment, she didn't move, didn't breathe. Then she set the glass down, carefully, deliberately, as if she needed something to do with her hands. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, her voice shaking ever so slightly. I stepped closer, pulling my phone from my pocket. With a few taps, I opened the screenshots I'd saved from her messages and held the screen up to her face. Her eyes darted to the phone, widening as she saw the damning texts. Then she looked back at me, her mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. "Care to explain?" I asked, my voice icy. For a split second, I thought she might crumble, that she'd finally admit everything. But then her expression hardened, and she straightened up, crossing her arms defensively. "Were you seriously snooping through my phone?" she snapped. "Do you even hear yourself, Matt? This is crazy. You're invading my privacy. Don't you dare try to flip this on me," I said, my voice rising. "You're the one sneaking around, sending messages to Travis, mocking me behind my back, and now you're going to stand there and play the victim? Unbelievable. You don't understand," she said quickly, her voice rising in pitch. "It's not what it looks like. Those messages, they were, I don't know, just stupid jokes. Harmless flirting. It didn't mean anything." I laughed, a cold, hollow sound. "Harmless? You sent him pictures, Emily. You planned meetups. You told him you couldn't stop thinking about him. What part of that sounds harmless to you?" Her facade cracked. "Okay, fine," she shouted, throwing her hands up. "Yes, I was flirting with him. Yes, I crossed a line. But I never slept with him, Matt. I swear. It was just texting. That's all." I stared at her, my stomach churning with disgust. "You expect me to believe that? After everything I just saw? You've been lying to my face for who knows how long, and now I'm supposed to trust you." "It's the truth," she insisted, her voice trembling now. "I made a mistake, okay? I messed up. But I didn't." "Stop," I said sharply, cutting her off. "Just stop. I'm done listening to your excuses." She opened her mouth to argue, but I held up a hand, silencing her. "I don't care what you say," I continued, my voice cold. "I know what I saw, and I know what you've been doing. This wasn't a mistake, Emily. This was deliberate, calculated. You betrayed me, and now you're scrambling to cover your tracks because you got caught." Her lips trembled, and for a moment, I thought she might cry. But then she straightened her shoulders, her expression shifting to anger. "You're not perfect, Matt," she snapped. "You think you're some saint, but you've been so wrapped up in your own world. You didn't even notice I was unhappy. Maybe if you'd been a better husband, this wouldn't have happened." The sheer audacity of her words left me speechless. My hands clenched into fists at my sides, my entire body trembling with rage. "You're really going to stand there and blame me for your affair?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "You cheat on me, lie to me, mock me, and now it's my fault? Unbelievable." She didn't respond. Instead, she grabbed her wine glass, downed the rest of it in one gulp, and stormed past me, heading for the stairs. "I'm done talking about this," she said over her shoulder. "You can sit here and stew in your paranoia all night if you want, but I'm not doing this anymore." As I watched her disappear upstairs, my hands shaking with barely contained fury, I realized something. This wasn't a fight. This was war, and she'd just made her first critical mistake. She thought she could walk away, brush this under the rug, and carry on like nothing had happened. But she didn't know the storm she'd just unleashed, because I wasn't going to let this go. Not until every lie she told, every secret she'd kept, came crashing down around her. I stayed in the kitchen long after Emily stormed upstairs, her footsteps echoing above me like gunshots in the silence. My mind was racing, a chaotic symphony of anger, betrayal, and cold calculation. She thought this was over. She thought she could slam the door on this conversation and wake up tomorrow like nothing happened. But I wasn't about to let her win this game. Her mockery was burned into my brain. "I can't believe he hasn't figured it out yet. Poor guy." Those words weren't just an insult. They were a challenge. And I wasn't going to sit there and lick my wounds while she laughed behind my back. I grabbed her phone again, my fingers moving quickly. The black heart contact had to be Travis, but I needed more proof. I went straight to her email. At first, it seemed clean, generic work messages, spam from clothing brands, confirmations for grocery deliveries. Then I found it. A single email from a burner account, buried under a pile of receipts and newsletters. No subject line, just a string of numbers for the sender's address. My heart pounded as I opened it. "Everything's ready. He'll never know. Can't wait to see you this weekend, T." A second later, a forwarded hotel reservation loaded on the screen. The name on the booking was Emily Summers, and the check-in date was tomorrow. My blood ran cold. They weren't just texting. They weren't just flirting. She'd booked a hotel room. And worse, she hadn't even bothered to hide it. Was she that confident I wouldn't catch her? Or did she just not care? I closed the email, forcing myself to take slow, deep breaths. This wasn't just some fling. This was premeditated. Every lie she told, every fake smile she'd flashed, it all pointed to this moment. But if she thought she could waltz out of here tomorrow, spend the weekend with him, and come back to play happy wife, she had no idea what I was capable of. I wasn't just going to confront her. I was going to catch her. The next morning, Emily was unusually chipper. She flitted around the kitchen, humming as she poured herself coffee and scrolled through her phone. Her nonchalance was like a dagger twisting in my chest. "I'm heading out for a bit," she said casually, not even glancing at me. "Errands, you know. Might take a while." "Errands," I repeated, sipping my own coffee. "Anything exciting?" She shrugged. "Just the usual. Groceries, dry cleaning. Nothing thrilling." I nodded, my face a mask of indifference. "Need any help?" Her hand froze for half a second before she quickly shook her head. "No, I've got it. Thanks, though." She left not long after, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor as she grabbed her purse and coat. "See you tonight," she called out, her voice sugary sweet. "Can't wait," I replied, forcing a smile. The second the door closed behind her, I sprang into action. I pulled out my phone, opening the GPS tracker app I'd installed on her car months ago. At the time, I thought I was being paranoid, but now it felt like the smartest decision I'd ever made. Her location pinged on the map, a slow-moving dot heading toward the edge of town. I watched as it stopped at a local gas station. A minute later, the dot moved again, heading directly to the address Travis had written on that crumpled note. "Got you." By the time I reached the address, my hands were gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles were white. It was a nondescript apartment building, one of those upscale complexes with secure entry and glossy landscaping. Her car was parked in the lot right next to his. I pulled into a spot a few rows back, far enough to avoid being seen. Then I waited. It didn't take long. 15 minutes later, they walked out together. Emily was smiling, her laugh carrying across the lot as Travis leaned in close, saying something I couldn't hear. She was dressed casually. Jeans, a fitted sweater, her hair tied back. But she looked good. She looked deliberate. They climbed into his car, and I followed, keeping my distance. They didn't go to a restaurant or a park or anywhere else they could pass as just friends. No, they went straight to a hotel. The hotel. I parked across the street, watching as they walked through the lobby doors without a care in the world. Emily didn't even glance over her shoulder. She didn't hesitate. I snapped photos from my car, blurry, yes, but clear enough to see who they were and where they were going. For a moment, I just sat there, the weight of what I was doing sinking in. Part of me wanted to barge into that lobby, confront them in front of everyone, and watch the look on their faces as their little fantasy came crashing down. But no, that wasn't enough. Not for me. I had a better plan. By the time I got home, Emily was already back. She was in the bathroom when I walked in, her voice carrying down the hall as she sang some mindless pop song. Her purse was on the counter, and I knew exactly what was inside it. The key card. I rifled through her bag, and sure enough, there it was. A sleek plastic card with the hotel's logo printed across the front. My stomach turned as I stared at it, imagining her using it to sneak into some room with Travis, their little secret world just beyond that door. But this key, it wasn't going to stay their secret for long. I put it back exactly where I found it and closed her purse. Then I went upstairs, my face calm, my voice steady as I called out to her. "How were your errands?" "Good," she called back, her voice chipper. "Anything interesting?" I asked, forcing a smile as she stepped out of the bathroom, her hair damp from the shower. "Not really," she said, drying her hair with a towel. "Why?" "No reason," I replied, leaning against the doorway. "Just curious." She smiled at me, that same fake smile she'd been using for weeks. And for the first time, I smiled back, because tomorrow I was going to use her lies against her. The next day, Emily's routine was unsettlingly normal. She woke up early, made herself a smoothie, and gave me her usual kiss on the cheek before heading out. The casualness of it all made my stomach churn. How easily she could act like nothing was wrong, like she wasn't about to spend the day wrapped up in another man's world. "I'll probably be back late," she said, adjusting her scarf by the door. "Work's been crazy, and I have a lot to catch up on." Her lies were so smooth they could have been scripted. I nodded, hiding the disgust bubbling inside me. "Take your time," I said, my tone light. She smiled. "Thanks for being so understanding." I followed her to the door, watching as she got into her car and drove off. The moment she was out of sight, I grabbed my own keys. Today, I wasn't going to sit around waiting. Today, I was going to destroy her lies. The drive to the hotel was quiet, my thoughts laser-focused. I'd memorized the details from her reservation, the room number, the check-in time. She thought she was clever, but she'd left too many breadcrumbs for me to follow. I arrived just as her car pulled into the lot. I parked discreetly a few rows back and watched as she climbed out, her demeanor relaxed, even happy. She wasn't meeting Travis out of guilt or desperation. This was excitement. The sight of her walking toward the lobby made my blood boil, but I forced myself to stay calm. Storming in without a plan wouldn't get me what I wanted. I waited for a few minutes before stepping inside. The lobby was sleek and modern, filled with travelers coming and going. I approached the front desk, my expression neutral. "Hi," I said to the clerk, sliding my phone across the counter with the reservation email pulled up. "I think my wife accidentally took my key card for our room. Could I get a replacement?" The clerk barely looked at me as they tapped at the keyboard. "What's the name on the reservation?" "Emily Summers." "And can I see your ID?" I handed it over, my heartbeat pounding in my ears. They matched the name to the reservation, handed me a shiny new key card, and smiled. "Here you go. Let us know if you need anything else." "Thanks," I said, slipping the card into my pocket. I walked toward the elevators, my steps deliberate. Every nerve in my body was alight, my hands shaking as I pressed the button for the 4th floor. The hallway was eerily quiet as I approached room 427. My grip tightened around the key card, my mind racing with images of what I might find behind the door. But I wasn't backing down. Not now. I slid the card into the reader, and the lock clicked open. Inside, the room was dimly lit, the curtains drawn against the afternoon sun. The air smelled faintly of cologne and something floral, Emily's perfume. And there they were. Emily was sitting on the bed, her legs crossed, laughing at something Travis was saying as he stood by the window. He turned first, his expression shifting from confusion to alarm. Emily followed his gaze, and when her eyes met mine, her face froze. "Matt?" she stammered, standing up so quickly she almost tripped. I didn't move. I stood in the doorway, the key card still in my hand, and let the silence stretch. "What the hell are you doing here?" Travis demanded, stepping forward like he had any right to challenge me. I ignored him, my eyes locked on Emily. "You have 2 seconds to explain this," I said, my voice calm but laced with venom. "It's not what it looks like," Emily blurted, her hands flying up as if to block my accusations. I laughed bitterly. "That's the best you've got? After everything? It's not what it looks like?" "Matt, please," she said, her voice trembling. "I can explain." "Explain," I barked, cutting her off. "You've been lying to me for weeks, sneaking around behind my back, and now you want to explain?" Travis stepped forward again, his hands raised like he was defusing a bomb. "Look, man, I don't want any trouble." I turned to him, my voice sharp. "Shut your mouth. You've caused enough trouble as it is." He froze, clearly not expecting me to bite back. "Matt," Emily said, her voice breaking. Save it," I snapped, holding up my phone. I opened the gallery and tossed it onto the bed, the screenshots of her texts and photos lighting up the screen. "I know everything, Emily. Every disgusting, pathetic detail." Her face crumpled, tears spilling down her cheeks. "It's not what you think. It's exactly what I think," I shouted, my composure snapping. "You planned this. You lied to my face, mocked me behind my back. And for what? For him." I pointed at Travis, who looked like he wanted to disappear. She tried to step closer, but I held up a hand to stop her. "Don't touch me. Matt, please," she whispered, her voice cracking. "I didn't mean for this to happen. It was a mistake." "A mistake," I said, my voice dripping with disbelief. "This isn't a mistake, Emily. It's a choice. You chose this. You chose him over our marriage, over me." For the first time, her mask slipped completely. She didn't deny it. She didn't try to spin the story. She just stood there, shaking, her tears falling silently. I looked at Travis one last time, my disgust palpable. "You can have her," I said, my voice low. "She's your problem now." Then I turned and walked out, the door slamming shut behind me. As I stepped into the elevator, the weight of everything hit me at once. My chest felt hollow, my throat tight. But one thought kept me steady, grounding me in the chaos. This wasn't the end. It was just the beginning of her reckoning. The drive home was surreal, like I was stuck in some twisted dream. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly they ached, but my mind was elsewhere, spinning with a cocktail of anger, betrayal, and, somewhere, buried deep grief. Emily's face was burned into my memory. The tears, the excuses, the sheer gall of her standing there with Travis and trying to talk her way out of it. By the time I pulled into the driveway, my anger had calcified into something colder, sharper. I wasn't going to wallow in misery, not for her. No, if Emily wanted to tear our marriage apart, she was going to feel every piece of it crumble around her. Inside, the house was too quiet, its stillness mocking me. I walked through the living room, the remnants of our life together staring back at me. The wedding photos on the mantel, the throw blanket she always wrapped herself in during movie nights. It all felt fake now, like props in a play I'd been forced to watch. I grabbed a duffel bag from the closet and started packing. Not for me, oh no. I wasn't the one leaving. This was her mess, and she was going to clean it up. I threw her clothes into the bag haphazardly, not caring what I grabbed. Dresses, shoes, random tops, it didn't matter. I wasn't trying to be neat. The chaotic pile of fabric spilling out of the bag mirrored my thoughts perfectly. Halfway through, I noticed her laptop sitting on the desk. I hesitated for a moment, then opened it. Her passwords were all the same, lazy, predictable. Took me less than a minute to unlock it. Her email was already open, and what I found sent a fresh wave of rage crashing through me. More messages, more plans. It wasn't just Travis. There were emails to other colleagues, invitations to happy hours, playful banter with flirty undertones. She was casting a wide net, like she needed constant validation to keep herself afloat. I felt sick. This wasn't just one affair. It was a pattern, a lifestyle. I forwarded everything to myself, every damning piece of evidence. When the last email was sent, I slammed the laptop shut and added it to the duffel bag. It was dark when she came home. I was sitting on the couch, her packed bag next to me, the screenshots from her texts and emails printed out and spread across the coffee table. The door creaked open, and I heard her heels click against the floor. "Hey!" she called, her voice cautious. "In here," I said, my tone flat. She appeared in the doorway, her face instantly falling when she saw me sitting there with all the evidence laid out like a crime scene. "Matt, what?" "Sit down," I interrupted, my voice cold and firm. She hesitated, then sat across from me, her hands twisting nervously in her lap. "I'm done playing games," I said, leaning forward. "No more excuses. No more lies. I know everything, Emily. Everything." She opened her mouth to speak, but I held up a hand to stop her. "I don't want your apologies. I don't want your tears. What I want is the truth." She hesitated, her eyes darting to the papers on the table. I don't know what to say," she stammered. "Try starting with the truth," I said, my voice razor-sharp. She sighed, her shoulders slumping. "Okay, fine," she said quietly. "I was unhappy. Things haven't been the same between us for a while, Matt. You've been distant, and I needed something to fill that void." "Distant," I repeated, my voice rising. "You think that justifies cheating? Lying to my face? Mocking me? I didn't mean for it to happen like this," she said, her voice cracking. "I never wanted to hurt you." "Then why did you?" I snapped, slamming my hand on the table. "Why, Emily? Was it Travis? The attention? The thrill of sneaking around? Or was it just that you could?" She flinched, tears welling up in her eyes. "I don't know," she whispered. "I don't know, Matt." I leaned back, shaking my head. "You don't know," I repeated bitterly. "That's your answer. You threw away our marriage, humiliated me, and now you don't even know why." Her silence was deafening. "Well, let me make it simple for you," I said, standing up and grabbing the duffel bag. "You're leaving. Tonight. I'm done sharing my house with someone who has no respect for me." Her eyes widened, panic flashing across her face. "Matt, please, let's talk about this. We can fix this." "Fix it?" I laughed coldly. "You don't fix something by setting it on fire, Emily. You destroyed this. Not me. You." I shoved the bag into her arms. "Take your things and go. You can stay with Travis or one of your other little playthings. I don't care." Tears streamed down her face as she clutched the bag. "Matt, please," she begged. "I made a mistake. But I love you. I still love you." "Love," I spat, my voice shaking with fury. "You don't know the first thing about love. If you did, you wouldn't have done this." Her lip trembled, but she didn't argue. She knew it was over. "Get out," I said, my voice breaking. "And don't come back." She stood there for a moment, as if hoping I'd change my mind. When I didn't, she turned and walked out, the door clicking shut behind her. I stood there for a long time, staring at the empty space where she'd been. The house felt quiet again, but this time, the stillness didn't mock me. It felt like the start of something new. She was gone, but her reckoning wasn't over. Not yet. When the door closed behind Emily, the silence felt like a victory and a wound all at once. My heart was pounding, my mind buzzing with the adrenaline of what I'd just done. She was gone, out of the house, but that wasn't enough. Not yet. Emily had shattered our life, mocked my trust, and dragged my dignity through the dirt. She thought this was the worst of it? No, I was just getting started. I went back to the coffee table, staring at the scattered evidence. The screenshots, the forwarded emails, and the hotel photos I'd taken of her and Travis walking into that room together. I wasn't going to let her walk away unscathed. Not after everything. This wasn't about revenge for the sake of revenge. It was about accountability. If she wanted to act like none of this mattered, I was going to make sure it mattered. The first thing I did was text my lawyer. I'd been keeping them on standby since the night I found the texts. And now it was time to pull the trigger. Me, it's time. File for divorce. I want the paperwork drafted by tomorrow. The reply came almost immediately. Lawyer. Understood. Let's set a meeting for the morning to go over details. I stared at the phone, the reality of those words settling over me. Divorce. It sounded so clinical, so detached, compared to the raw devastation I felt. But it was the only way forward now. Next, I emailed my HR department. I needed a day off, no, a week off. I couldn't show up to work pretending everything was normal while this mess unfolded. Once that was handled, I opened my social media apps. Emily and I shared a polished digital life, full of happy vacation photos and anniversary posts that now felt like cruel jokes. I deleted all of it. Every photo of us together, every caption declaring my love for her, every trace of the life we'd built. It was all wiped clean. Then I changed my relationship status to separated. I didn't add details or a rant. I wasn't going to air my dirty laundry for sympathy. But I knew Emily would see it, and so would her friends, family, and coworkers. The message was subtle but clear. The facade was over. The next step was more satisfying. I drafted a carefully worded email to Travis's boss. Subject: Conduct concerns regarding employee Travis Peterson. Dear Mr. Lang, I hope this email finds you well. I regret to inform you of a situation involving one of your employees, Travis Peterson. Over the past several weeks, Mr. Peterson has engaged in inappropriate and unprofessional behavior with my wife, Emily Summers, who is a collaborator on several of your firm's projects. Attached are screenshots and photographic evidence of their interactions, including during work hours and at a professional event. I believe this conduct reflects poorly on your company's values and professionalism. While this is a deeply personal matter, I feel obligated to inform you, as it could have implications for your firm's reputation. Sincerely, Matthew Summers. I attached every incriminating screenshot and photo I had of him and Emily. I wasn't sure how his boss would react, but I didn't care. Travis had been an active participant in destroying my marriage, and now he was going to deal with the fallout. Finally, I turned my attention to Emily's world. I knew her well enough to know her career was her crown jewel. She'd worked hard to build her reputation as a dedicated, professional attorney. But the emails I'd found told a different story. A woman who blurred lines, prioritized personal thrills over professionalism, and lied to everyone around her. I wasn't going to send her boss anything. Yet, I wasn't interested in ruining her career outright, not unless she pushed me further. But I did draft an anonymous email to her firm's HR department, outlining my concerns about an employee's unprofessional relationship with a client. It wasn't malicious. It was leverage. Insurance. If Emily decided to fight me in the divorce or try to take more than her fair share, I'd make sure her lies didn't stop at me. By the time I finished, it was late. The house was dark, the glow of my laptop the only light in the room. My exhaustion was bone deep, but I couldn't stop. Not yet. I opened my phone one last time and scrolled through my contacts. Emily's parents. We'd always been close. Her mom adored me, and her dad respected me. But they didn't know this side of her, the side that had unraveled everything we'd built. After a moment's hesitation, I dialed her mother's number. It rang twice before she picked up. "Matt," she said warmly. "It's so nice to hear from you. How are you?" I swallowed hard, my throat dry. "Hi, Carol. I need to talk to you. It's important." Her tone shifted immediately, concern lacing her words. "What's wrong? Is everything okay?" I hesitated, the words catching in my throat. But then I remembered Emily's mocking texts, her laughter with Travis, the way she tried to blame me for her betrayal. "No," I said finally. "Everything's not okay. Emily and we're separating. She's been unfaithful." The silence on the other end was heavy. "Oh my God," Carol whispered. "Matt, I don't know what to say. I just thought you should know," I said quietly. "I didn't want you to hear it from someone else." "Thank you for telling me," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I'm so sorry, Matt. You don't deserve this." I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. "Thanks, Carol. I appreciate it." After we hung up, I sat there for a long time, staring at the phone in my hand. I didn't know what Emily's family would say to her when they found out, but I wasn't interested in protecting her from the consequences of her actions. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about justice, and justice had just begun. The next morning, I woke to the buzzing of my phone. Notifications poured in like a flood: emails, texts, and messages on social media. I wasn't surprised. After the subtle updates I'd made online and the calls I'd initiated, it was only a matter of time before the ripple effects hit. I scrolled through the texts. Carol, Emily's mom. Matt, I spoke to Emily last night. She came over late, and I could barely get a word out of her. She was crying. I told her what she did was unforgivable. I want you to know we're on your side. Please let us know if you need anything. Her mom's loyalty stung in a strange way. This wasn't just my loss, it was theirs too. Emily's actions had fractured more than just our marriage. I moved on to the next messages. My lawyer. Papers are drafted. Bring everything you want included to the meeting today at 3 p.m. Let's get this done. Good. The sooner this was official, the better. Then there was a string of missed calls from an unfamiliar number. Curious, I played one of the voicemails. Hi, Mr. Summers. This is Alan Lang from Peterson and Company. I received your email yesterday regarding Travis Peterson. We'd like to discuss this matter further. Please call me back at your earliest convenience. I grinned, the first real smile I'd managed in days. The fallout had begun. At exactly 3 p.m., I sat across from my lawyer in a sleek, sunlit office. The paperwork in front of me was crisp, clinical, and final. Once you sign here, my lawyer explained, tapping the document, we'll file immediately. The court will serve Emily within 48 hours. I picked up the pen and hovered over the signature line, hesitating for just a second. This was it. The end of everything we'd built together. But it wasn't my fault, it was hers. With a steady hand, I signed. My lawyer nodded approvingly. And about the evidence you sent over, do you want to include that in the filing? Yes, I said firmly. All of it. Let the judge see exactly who she is. And the house. She's not getting it, I said. She walked out on this marriage. She doesn't get to take my home. When I got home, Emily's car was in the driveway. For a second, I considered turning around, letting her stew alone. But I was done hiding. I walked in, my footsteps deliberate. She was sitting in the living room, her duffel bag at her feet. She looked up when I entered, her face a mess of red eyes and smeared mascara. Matt, she started, her voice weak. I didn't let her finish. I filed, I said, tossing a copy of the papers onto the coffee table. You'll be served by the end of the week. Her eyes widened as she reached for the papers, her hands trembling. You're serious? Dead serious. Tears filled her eyes again, spilling down her cheeks. Matt, please, we can fix this. I'll do anything. Therapy, counseling, whatever it takes. I made a mistake. You didn't make a mistake. I interrupted, my voice sharp. You made a series of decisions. Calculated, deliberate decisions to lie, cheat, and betray me. And now you want to act like this can just be undone? Can't, Emily. It's over. She broke down, her sobs filling the room. Once, I might have felt sorry for her, but now all I felt was a strange sense of detachment. This was the bed she'd made, and now she had to lie in it. I talked to your mom, I added, watching her reaction. Her head snapped up, panic flashing in her eyes. You what? She knows, I said flatly. Your whole family knows, and soon everyone else will too. Your work, your friends, they're gonna find out who you really are. Her face crumpled, but I didn't stop. Travis's boss knows too. I sent him everything. You can explain your mistake to him. See how far that gets you. You're ruining my life, she screamed. Standing up now, her fists clenched, I stepped closer, towering over her. No, Emily, you ruined your life. I'm just making sure everyone sees it for what it is. She stumbled back, tears streaming down her face, her anger collapsing into despair. I loved you, she whispered. No, I said, my voice quiet but firm. You loved yourself, and now you're on your own. The next few hours passed in a blur. Emily packed the rest of her things while I stayed in the kitchen, making it clear I wasn't going to help her. When she finally left, the house felt heavier than ever, the echoes of her presence lingering like a shadow. I knew this wasn't the end. There would be more conversations, more fallout, more mess to clean up. But for now, the hardest part was done. I poured myself a glass of bourbon and sat on the couch, staring at the space where our wedding photo used to hang. The life I'd known was gone, shattered by her betrayal. But as I sipped my drink, a strange sense of peace settled over me. This wasn't a defeat. It was a reset, and I was ready to rebuild without her. The house was finally quiet. Not the suffocating silence of waiting for the next lie, but a calm, empty stillness. Emily's scent no longer lingered in the air. Her voice no longer echoed off the walls, and her presence was no longer something I had to endure. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the divorce papers I had signed just hours earlier. The weight of it all still pressed down on me, but the anger had subsided, leaving only a dull ache in its place. For 7 years, this house had been a home, a place of laughter, love, and shared dreams. Now it felt like a stage set after the play had ended, bare, meaningless, and hollow. I wasn't naive enough to think this was over. The fallout from Emily's choices would ripple for weeks, maybe months. I knew her well enough to know she wouldn't go quietly. There would be pleas, excuses, maybe even attempts to claw her way back into my life. But I also knew that I was done. No matter what she said, no matter what she did, there was no undoing the damage she'd caused. The first crack came the next morning. I was sitting on the couch, scrolling through emails, when my phone buzzed. It was a message from Carol, her mother. "Carol, Matt, I'm so sorry for everything. Emily called me this morning, hysterical. She's blaming you, saying you've ruined her life, but I told her she has no one to blame but herself. She needs to face the consequences of her actions. You deserve better." I sighed, rubbing my temple. Carol had always been supportive, but I hadn't expected her to take my side so strongly. A second message buzzed through. "Carol, by the way, her dad wants to talk to you. He's furious with her, but he also wants to make sure you're okay. Let me know if it's too soon." I typed a quick reply. "Me? Thank you, Carol. I appreciate it. I'm okay for now, but I'll reach out when I'm ready." Her family was stepping up in ways Emily never had. That thought lingered in my mind as I went about the rest of my day. The second crack was more satisfying. Around noon, I got a call from an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. "Hello, Mr. Summers. This is Alan Lang, managing partner at Peterson and Company." His tone was professional, clipped. I leaned back in my chair, smirking to myself. "What can I do for you, Mr. Lang? I received your email regarding Travis Peterson and his inappropriate conduct. After reviewing the evidence you provided, I want to inform you that we are taking this matter very seriously. Mr. Peterson has been placed on unpaid leave pending a formal investigation." "Good to hear," I said, keeping my tone measured. Lang cleared his throat. "I'm sorry for what you've gone through, Mr. Summers. This behavior is unacceptable, and it does not reflect the values of our firm. If you have any further information to share, please don't hesitate to reach out." "I'll let you know," I said. "Thank you for handling this promptly." When the call ended, I let out a deep breath. It wasn't much, but it was something. Travis wasn't going to walk away from this unscathed. By the evening, Emily's attempts to contact me began. It started with texts. "Emily, Matt, please, can we talk? I need to explain. I made a mistake, but it doesn't mean I don't love you. Emily, I can't believe you've told everyone about this. My parents won't even speak to me. You're turning everyone against me. Emily, Matt, I'm begging you, don't let this be how it ends." The desperation in her messages was palpable, but it only served to harden my resolve. She wasn't apologizing because she was sorry. She was apologizing because she'd lost control. Then the calls started. I ignored them all. Finally, at around 9 p.m., she showed up. I heard the knock at the door and knew immediately it was her. She had a way of knocking 3 quick raps, just enough to sound casual. I stood in the hallway for a moment, debating whether to answer. Eventually, I opened the door. Emily stood there, her face streaked with tears, clutching her coat tightly around her. "Matt," she said, her voice breaking, "please, just hear me out." I leaned against the doorframe, crossing my arms. "You've got 2 minutes." She flinched but nodded. I don't even know where to start," she stammered. "I messed up. I know I did. But you have to believe me, it wasn't about you. It was about me, about feeling alive again. I didn't realize what I had until it was gone. Please, Matt, I'm begging you. Don't let this be the end of us. I stared at her, my expression unreadable. You felt alive? I said, my voice cold. While you lied to me, while you laughed at me behind my back. You felt alive while you destroyed everything we built. Matt, No, I said sharply. You don't get to make this about you. Not anymore. You made your choices, Emily. And now you have to live with them. Her lip quivered, and she stepped closer, reaching out to touch my arm. I pulled back, her hand hanging in the air between us. I loved you, she whispered. You loved the idea of me? I said, my voice flat. But love doesn't look like this. Love doesn't destroy. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then, finally, I stepped back and closed the door in her face. That night, as I sat alone in the house that used to feel like ours, I realized something. This wasn't just an ending. It was a beginning. Emily had taken so much from me, but she hadn't taken everything. I still had my integrity, my future, and my freedom. And as I stared out the window, watching the last traces of her fade into the night, I knew I wasn't broken. I was free. The days after Emily's final visit felt lighter than I ever imagined they could. For the first time in months, years, maybe, I wasn't walking on eggshells, analyzing every word or glance. The silence that once haunted me now felt like a blank canvas. I went through the house systematically, removing the last traces of her. Her clothes were already gone, but there were still little reminders. A hairbrush in the bathroom, her favorite mug in the kitchen, a pair of earrings on the dresser. I boxed it all up, sealed the lid, and set it by the front door for her to pick up. The wedding photo on the mantel came last. I stared at it for a long time, memories flooding back. The day had felt so full of promise. Her laugh genuine, her vows heartfelt. I'd believed every word she said. But the woman in that photo wasn't the same person who had mocked me behind my back, who had betrayed me with Travis and God knows who else. That woman was gone. I set the frame face down and left it there. On the second day, Carol called again. Matt, she said, her voice warm but tinged with sadness. How are you holding up? I'm fine, I said, and for the first time I meant it. She hesitated before continuing. I wanted to thank you for being so honest with us. You didn't have to tell me or her father, but you did, and we respect you for it. You deserve to know, I said simply. She's not handling this well, Carol admitted. She's angry, confused, blaming everyone but herself. I told her she needed to take responsibility, but I don't think she's ready to hear it. Maybe she never will, I said. There was a long pause. Then she sighed. Well, just know that if you ever need anything, we're here. You'll always be part of our family, Matt. Thanks, Carol, I said, a lump forming in my throat. We hung up, and for the first time I let myself grieve. Not for Emily, but for what I thought we had. Later that afternoon, I got an email from my lawyer. Subject: Progress update on divorce filing. Matt, I wanted to inform you that Emily has agreed to the terms of the divorce. The assets will be divided as outlined in the initial filing, with the house and majority of the financial accounts remaining in your possession. She will retain her personal accounts and items but has forfeited any claim to spousal support. We're on track for a swift resolution. Please let me know if you have any questions or concerns. Best regards, David. I reread the email twice, my chest tightening with a mix of relief and finality. Emily's signature on those papers meant she was truly out of my life now. There would be no more pleas, no more manipulation, no more attempts to salvage something that couldn't be saved. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. It wasn't the ending I wanted, but it was the one I needed. The next morning, I decided to reclaim my life in earnest.
I started with the house.
I rearranged the furniture, painted the walls, and replaced the decorations that screamed of her influence. I wanted the space to feel like mine again, not a reminder of what had been lost. I found an old box of photos tucked away in the attic. Pictures from my childhood, college, and early years before Emily. I spent hours going through them, reconnecting with the person I was before her. That night, I cooked myself a real meal, something I hadn't done in weeks. The scent of garlic and herbs filled the kitchen, a small but comforting reminder that life could be good again. By the end of the week, I realized something surprising. I wasn't just surviving, I was living. Emily's betrayal had been a wrecking ball, but it had also cleared the way for something new. I no longer felt tethered to the past, no longer haunted by the questions of what I could have done differently. The fault was hers, and I was finally free to move forward. On Saturday, I decided to take a step I'd been avoiding. I called my closest friends, people I'd distanced myself from during the chaos of the marriage. "Hey," I said awkwardly when Brian, my best friend from college, answered. "Matt?" he replied, surprised. "Man, it's been forever. What's up?" I hesitated, then dove in. "Emily and I are divorcing. Things got messy and I need to start fresh." I thought it was time to reconnect. There was a pause before Brian said, "Damn, man, I'm sorry to hear that, but I'm glad you called. Let's grab a drink and catch up." By the time the call ended, I felt a weight lift off my chest. I wasn't alone, and I didn't have to rebuild my life in isolation. The following week, as I sat in my newly rearranged living room, sipping coffee and watching the sunrise, I realized something. Emily had broken my trust, shattered my heart, and stolen years of my life. But she hadn't taken everything. I still had my integrity, my sense of self, and the ability to move forward. She had tried to tear me down, but in the end, all she'd done was show me my own strength. And for the first time in months, I smiled, a real, genuine smile. I was free. Weeks passed, and the chaos surrounding Emily's betrayal slowly faded into the background. The divorce papers were officially filed with the court, and the terms were clear. The house, the accounts, and my peace of mind were mine. Emily's influence in my life had been reduced to a legal process, something formal and detached, an afterthought. For the first time in years, I felt like I was truly in control of my life. One crisp Saturday morning, I decided to reclaim more than just my home and routine. I wanted to rediscover the parts of myself I'd buried in the monotony of a marriage that had been unraveling long before the betrayal came to light. I laced up an old pair of running shoes, grabbed my headphones, and headed out for a run. The air was cold, biting against my skin, but it woke me up in a way I hadn't felt in years. The rhythmic pounding of my feet against the pavement was soothing, each step shaking off the weight of what had happened. I didn't run far that day, but when I came home, I felt different, lighter. It wasn't just the endorphins. It was the realization that life was still out there, waiting for me to take it back. That evening, Brian stopped by. True to his word, he'd been making an effort to pull me out of my shell. "Let's hit a bar," he said, clapping me on the shoulder. "You need a night out, man." I hesitated, the thought of crowds and small talk making me want to crawl back under a blanket. But then I saw the look in his eyes. Not pity, but determination. Brian wasn't going to let me stay stuck in the past. "Fine," I said, grabbing my coat. "But if the music's terrible, I'm leaving." He laughed. "Deal." The bar was loud, filled with people who seemed oblivious to the kind of emotional wreckage I'd been dealing with. At first, I felt out of place, awkwardly nursing a beer while Brian chatted easily with a few people he knew. Then someone caught my eye. She was standing at the end of the bar, her dark hair tumbling over one shoulder as she laughed at something the bartender said. She wasn't overly dressed up, just a simple sweater and jeans, but there was something magnetic about her. Something real. "See something you like?" Brian teased, nudging me. I shook my head, embarrassed. "I'm not ready for that." "Not asking you to marry her, man," he said, grinning. "Just go say hi." Before I could argue, she turned, and her eyes met mine. There was a split second of hesitation. Then she smiled, warm, genuine, unguarded. Something in me shifted. Her name was Claire. We started talking, and to my surprise, it wasn't awkward. She asked about me, not in a prying way, but with genuine curiosity. She told me about her job as a graphic designer, her love for hiking, and how she'd recently adopted a rescue dog named Milo. I found myself laughing, something I hadn't done in weeks. At one point, she leaned in slightly, her expression curious. "You seem like you've been through something, but you're handling it well." I paused, surprised by her observation. "Yeah," I said finally. "It's been a rough year, but I'm figuring it out." "Well," she said with a smile, raising her glass, "here's to figuring it out." We clinked glasses, And for the first time in what felt like forever, I felt something I thought I'd lost. Hope. By the time I got home, the weight of the evening hit me in the best way. Meeting Claire wasn't a promise, not even a new chapter. It was just a moment. But it was a moment that reminded me life didn't stop with Emily's betrayal. It didn't have to be defined by it, either. The next morning, I woke up to the soft light of the sun streaming through the windows. I made myself a strong cup of coffee and sat at the kitchen table, staring out at the backyard. This house, once a battleground of lies and tension, now felt like a sanctuary. Every wall I'd painted, every piece of furniture I'd moved, every trace of Emily I'd erased. It was all a declaration. This was my space now, and this was my life now. As I sipped my coffee, my phone buzzed with a text from Brian. Brian, so, Claire seemed cool. You gonna see her again? I chuckled, shaking my head. I typed back, me maybe, one step at a time. And that was exactly what I planned to do. Take it one step at a time. Rebuild, rediscover, reclaim. Emily's betrayal had been a storm, tearing through everything I thought I knew. But now, in the calm that followed, I realized something. The pieces that remained were mine. And from them, I could build something stronger, something better, something entirely my own. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't just surviving. I was living.